So today is July's installment in our monthly series, Be the Change. Every month we pick a different topic of social or civic interest and engagement. We've been doing this since shortly after the 2016 election, and done them on all kinds of different topics, everything from immigration to speech to transgender rights to voting and everything in between. We then bring in people who know a lot more about that issue than we do, and certainly today you could not imagine that we could get people who are more knowledgeable than the two that we have here. I would imagine that 10 years ago, if you asked 100 people what were the most important political or social or moral issues of our time, not even 1 in 100 would have mentioned climate change. And yet, today, that has certainly changed. We're nowhere near where we want to be in terms of what we're doing about it, but at least in terms of awareness, the issue has been put squarely on the agenda. Academics, journalists, policymakers, even presidential candidates are finally talking about it as one of the central issues of our time. And so I want to tell you about the two people we have here today. David Mahood is a sustainability consultant, environmental writer, and poet. He holds an MBA in sustainability from San Francisco Institute of Architecture. His articles have appeared in numerous publications, and he also writes poetry, which has been published in a bunch of places as well. He's the author of One Green Deed Spawns Another, Tales of Inspiration on the Quest for Sustainability, for which he appeared at Porter Square Books last year. Frances Moore Lepay is the author or co-author of 19 books about world hunger, living democracy, and the environment, beginning with the iconic Diet for a Small Planet in 1971, which to date I believe has sold more than 3 million copies. In the fall of 2007, she co-authored Daring Democracy, Igniting Power, Meaning, and Connection for the America We Want, for which she also appeared at Porter Square Books, as I recall. I could spend basically the rest of the time today reading Frances' biography. I'm not going to do that. So I'll just give you a few highlights. She's received the Right Livelihood Award, the International Studies Association Outstanding Public Scholar Award, the Nonino Prize in Italy for her life's work. She's received 18 honorary doctorates. From 2000 to 2001, she was a visiting scholar here at MIT, and in 2008 received the James Beard Foundation Humanitarian of the Year Award for her lifelong impact on the way people all over the world think about food, nutrition, and agriculture. She's a founding member of the World Future Council based in Hamburg, and serves on the National Advisory Board of the Union of Concerned Scientists and International Board of Advisors of Grassroots International. Now, when we do our Be the Change events, in addition to inviting experts to talk to us, we also choose a nonprofit that is working in the issue in the area that we're talking about. And then we donate a portion of sales in the store to that organization. Today, I'm delighted to say that we're donating to the Sunrise Movement, a movement led by young people to stop climate change and create good jobs in the process. And I'm pleased to welcome Alexa Figueroa and Nick Rab, who represent the organization. So 20% of all sales between 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock will be donated to the Sunrise Movement, so buy stuff. I also wanted to let you know that today's event is co-sponsored by Dig Boston, your one-stop nexus for everything worth doing or knowing in the Boston area. Now I sound like NPR. And the Boston Institute for Nonprofit Journalism, a community resource supporting the development and production of independent news. So please, without further ado, let's give a warm welcome to all our guests, and I'm going to turn it over to David.
Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for a great turnout. I'm just going to start with one quick question, and then I'm going to bring it back to some of the relevance of why Frankie's here, why I'm here, and why my two esteemed guests, much younger guests, are here as well with me. So for today's purposes, obviously this is about climate change, and so what I wanted to do is talk about obviously what we're doing, what we want to do, what you guys want us to do, and also how are we going to increase community involvement and civic engagement, which is a big part of obviously this Be the Change series. So first of all, let me ask this. How many climate activists do we have out in the audience? Yeah, let's say 2/3. How many people out there believe that human-induced climate change is out of control? So guess what? We're all activists now. So anyway, yes. First of all, Diet for a Small Planet in 1971 was certainly groundbreaking. I was just reading a book on Earth Day because I'm doing my next book is on Earth Day and some of the articles I wrote about Earth Day. But what I found out was that Diet for a Small Planet outsold the two biggest books from the original Earth Day day, which was April 22nd, 1970, The Population Bomb and The Environmental Handbook. So keep that in mind with what kind of impact that Diet for a Small Planet had. So maybe you want to talk a little bit about that relevance back then and also to today where you're at and being the inspiration you are to many of us.
Can I stand up?
You can stand up.
Hi, thank you so much. It's so exciting to see all of you here. David, you're going to kick me when I get to when I get too long. Yes, Diet for a Small Planet. I believed then, my best hunch as a young woman was that, gosh, since we all have to eat, if we could just understand why hunger, that would unlock the mysteries of economics and politics for me. And soon I learned, I had a great soundbite. Hunger is not caused by scarcity of food, it's caused by scarcity of democracy. And in some ways, I've spent the last almost 50 years trying to figure out what that means and acting on it. And over the years, I continued to write on these core essence of democracy and what is it, and thought that, and by the 90s, I founded the Center for Living Democracy in Vermont, and really believed that the focus was on expanding democracy from something done to us or for us to what we ourselves do, a way of life. And then I began to realize, yes, that is true, and the very structure of democracy that we've taken for granted, we cannot any longer take for granted. It is under direct attack. Adam Eichen, a millennial, and I wrote a book together that David mentioned, Daring Democracy, and where we were able to see for the first time as we went to the roots how our mindsets have been manipulated in this country. It's not a conspiracy theory, it's a public record, come to be told more and more government can't do anything right, and just leave it up to private enterprise. And so over the decades we have seen erosion in voting rights, in gerrymandering, in money and politics. And so how do we, my challenge now is how do we address the climate crisis and democracy and the economic inequality that so much has to be addressed to address climate change? How do we take all those roots, give up the notion of chicken and egg, and really able to hold it all in our consciousness and move forward together? And what changed my life so much, and Mary Redwood is here in the audience with me. There she is. We marched from Philadelphia to Washington, D.C. in 2016. And I just want to say that Democracy Spring March changed my life profoundly, because for the first time I knew there was a democracy movement that I am part of. And so the democracy piece of the climate action to address the crisis is so critical, and I encourage all of you. We at Small Planet, or with Democracy Initiative, a very large intersectional organization, we're creating an online hub for the democracy movement, and I really want anyone here who's interested in that, please get in touch with me, because we need all the help we can get to get that launched this fall. But my real focus, and so I'm so glad, David, you organized us toward this, is to help us see that indeed it's not too late. That is the new theme song of my life. Working on a book with Bob Massey, that will be the title. And this notion that hope is not for wimps. Hope is impossible without action. And so the theme of my life is this notion of eyes wide open hope. Hope is power, that we can have. It's not pessimism, it's not optimism, it's possibilism. And to hold in our minds that which has happened in the past that we would never have believed possible until it happened. And so to be open that we can make this turn, no matter how big the odds seem now, that unexpected things happen. And I already have told you this, I will tell you again. The Sunrise Movement has done so much to make me believe that it's not possible to know what's possible, and we can go for it together. So thank you.
So we wanted to make this very much an open format, so at any point, ask questions. We're here to answer questions, but also we're going to address, we have our own sort of outline of questions, but we want to make sure we're getting all of yours. So feel free at any point to stop us and ask us anything you'd like specifically to be answered. Yeah, we reflect a few different generations up here, so we have different perspectives, but we are very target focused on climate change. Obviously, climate change mitigation is critical for all of us. Like I said, we're all climate activists now. Maybe we didn't want that role, but we've got it now, and we've got to deal with it. So one of the questions I'm going to start with, most of you, some of you probably already have your own perspectives on this, but how the heck did we get to this point? This timeline of the environment movement goes back all the way to the 50s. Exxon, for example, knew about climate change back in the 50s. They basically were doing studies internally about it. They told us about it. They were on board in the 70s to try to make some change. So how the heck did we get to this point? So I'm going to read a bit from, this is going to go a little bit back beyond the Exxon era, but I'm going to read a little bit from one of my books about just the basis of that. And I know Frankie probably wants to also add to that, but if you want to hold it for me real quick, and I'll just read very quickly. We promise we won't just read from books. Thanks. So hundreds of years ago, our planet was in ecological balance, following a cyclical pattern established over millennia. However, as the human population has grown into the billions, our ability to superconsume natural resources has also grown. This very simply has altered that cyclical pattern. We are currently conducting a unique experiment on the only known habitat that can support life. Unique in an alarming sort of way. Not all of this has been done with ill intent or by some nefarious laboratory egghead, because as we know, species evolve and populations grow exponentially, if unchecked. It certainly takes a lot more to support 7 billion people than it did for the 1 billion who existed in 1800. And we aren't exactly roaming the planet like Cro-Magnons, surviving on the bare roots of what the land provides. We have drilled, spilled, mined, fished, dredged, burned, exploded, clear-cut, gassed, and gouged our way here. While we have also made colossal achievements as a species, our big-brained ancestors would be awed by our evolution. It doesn't change the fact that we now need to rechart our course. How we got here is not worth debating. How we react and reconstruct a habitat for generations to come is what matters. Did you want to add to that at all?
Well,
How did we get?
I alluded to, I guess my life's work started with this realization that the frame that we see the world through is all important. And we were seeing with Diet for a Small Planet, I realized, wait a minute, when I put two and two together, literally, I realized there's more than enough food for all of us, and yet the frame was scarcity. And I think the fear frame has permeated this brutal form of capitalism that we have that has kept us in this competitive, just focused always on production and not thinking in systems, in an ecological worldview. And so I alluded earlier to the campaign from starting in 1971 with a very scary memo from Lewis Powell, who was soon to be a Supreme Court justice, saying that unless we just let the free enterprise system work, that we're done, and identifying Ralph Nader as the big enemy number one. So I think it's that mindset very much that has been inculcated in our culture, that we are in this competitive race, and that's what we focus on, not on the ecosystem that is our life. So I believe strongly in the power of ideas, and we've got to go that deep to shifting the mindset away from a fear to a possibility frame.
So how we got to this point also includes these special folks over here from Sunrise. as a youth movement group, they've inherited some of this mess. I think for all of it, yeah, in the back, right. Yeah, we have given them a somewhat disadvantage in moving forward. So I know you guys, your movement is really awesome. You're less than 2 years old, am I correct? Just over 2 years old. And most of us recognize the names, Varshini Prakash. Most of you know her name. The youth movement has gained major traction. Is anybody out in the audience not heard of the name Greta Thunberg? Right? So it's very interesting to see now that this movement, somewhat retrograde movement from the original Earth Day, is spawning again, and the youth group of today is maybe more powerful, I think, even certainly from a legislative standpoint, than the original marchers of the original Earth Day. So how did you guys get so big and so powerful and so impactful so quickly?
I guess just like you said before, we are given this earth right now. We're inheriting all this mess, and young people are mad, and we're full of passion. And as soon as we see something that is wrong and not being addressed, we are ready to organize together and not see, at least with the Sunrise Movement, it's very inclusive. So we don't see socioeconomic status or race, and we are able to organize together and attack this problem. And it's very popular because we are seeing this on our daily lives. At least most of us have asthma or live in like polluted areas. The air is not being breathable anymore. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, exactly everything that you said, Alexa. And, you know, when we talk about democracy and when we talk about working together, I think it's almost a happy accident that young people have such a shoulder to burden, a burden to shoulder. Who would burden shoulders? But because, you know, typically young people, you know, we have this element of hope that you were talking about. You know, it seems historically that young people often lead the charge on these big types of changes. And we do it because, you know, we don't judge each other, you know, as much as, you know, others do sometimes. And we're able to come together, like Alexa said, and that's like a huge part of organizing, I think.
Yeah, and I would caution anybody who underestimates this group. These guys are doing some amazing things, and they're influencing policy in short order. So I wanted to move on a little bit, because one of the things that I think about, and I'm actually writing about right now, is there haven't been a lot of climate legislation victories over a 40-year period. You know, we've had maybe the big one, which was Montreal Protocol. We got certainly our ozone issue back in order. But beyond that, it's been really slow going in terms of environmental victory, climate legislation victories. So, you know, I think we think about the modern environment movement. I was talking about, you know, Exxon knowing back in the 50s, but, you know, Rachel Carson's book came out in the 60s. That certainly propelled maybe the modern environment movement. It certainly contributed to it, let's put it that way. And then that timeline from the 70s, from Earth Day to Endangered Species Act to Clean Water, and all those major legislative victories in the 70s kind of came to a halt. And what's interesting to me is that you can see some parallels now between the Reagan administration and our current administration. If you don't remember the Reagan playbook, they did the same thing. They denounced science. They took the legs out from under the EPA. Does anybody remember who his EPA administrator first was for the Reagan administration? Here's a name you might remember. No, Reagan. Ruckelshaus was Nixon.
The mother of the, what if
There it
someone's
is.
going for the United States Supreme Court? Jill Gorsuch or something like that?
Gorsuch. So somebody said it in the back. Yeah, Ann Gorsuch
Ann
was
Gorsuch.
the head of EPA under Reagan. And think about that. Now we've got her son doing the duty of this current administration. So, and all this effort to deregulate and to take science out of the administration and to make sure policy isn't driven by science and all the goodwill that, for all his flaws, Jimmy Carter was actually pretty interesting when it came to getting interested science behind climate change, and also when it came to land management, a lot of different things. Jimmy Carter was really forward thinking. So, oh yeah, we've got a question in the back.
What do you think of the Green New Deal and South Democrats, people of Joe Biden?
Yeah, we are going to get to that. Yeah. We're not at that timeline yet. But the interesting thing is that what has happened in this current administration is not new. This really did happen before, and in my book, the first chapter I have is with an interview with a guy by the name of George M. Woodwell. I'm sure some of you may know that name. He founded the Woods Hole Research Center, which is a climate change think tank. He's 91 years old. He's still out there doing his thing, but he was fighting during that time, and he was on these panels, the Council for Environmental Quality, and all this major effort done to look at how we're going to reshape our energy policy, which was what Carter really wanted to do toward the latter part of his administration. And all that goodwill, all that amazing amount of information died in the 80s. So we went from what you could certainly argue as the decade of the environment, the 70s, to the 80s, which was ignoring it. And we are now back at that same type of legislative action. So anyway, just a little bit of the timeline. Yeah. Not on that cheery note, we'll move forward, but but there are different times when we get galvanized, our interests get moved forward, and so I have a question that I'm going to reach out to all of us. Many of us have specific moments that galvanized our efforts in this fight to mitigate climate change. Do you have any of those moments that you would like to share? Any of you guys, Alexa or Nick or Frankie?
You want to go? Well, I can start. So, and maybe we'll lead into it. So I first want to say I think this is one of the more important questions that we can ask. And Sunrise in particular thinks that this is an amazing question because, while talking about the history of environmentalism and the history of the climate movement, sometimes it gets mired in these sort of, policy level details, scientific details, but this question really gets at something fundamental that we all share. It's like, what is our story, right? In Sunrise, we talk about sharing our stories. That's the way that we build power in a way that's accessible to everyone. So, I don't know, whenever I talk about my story, it's not really grandiose. Like, I personally don't have any specific, one-point galvanizing moments, but just seeing how other people react to that is like part of the whole movement, right? It's part of the whole idea of how we spread this to other people. What do you think, Alexa?
That is true. Storytelling, it's something that they teach us in Sunrise. It's a way to connect with the audience, even when you probably are not, so close. And I guess for me, like I said, I suffer from asthma. So whenever I walk somewhere, I already start feeling like my lungs a little, working too hard. And it's like a little reminder every time, like, oh yeah, air quality here isn't so great. And not all of us have that radar. And another thing is, right now that you just said that, and I never thought of this before, like I had a class it's called Toxic Consumables, and it's all like the toxics around us and stuff. And I was gonna talk about that right now, but to be honest, when you were just saying that question right now, it made me think when I was driving back from Florida to Virginia, we had this huge road trip, and I don't know if you guys heard, there was like a bombogenesis thing. And I saw Georgia and Tallahassee, there was snow. And I saw iguanas and all these reptiles frozen. And I think that's my moment. This is the first time I actually thought of that, saying like, wow, like this is happening. And I lived 6 years in Florida, and I saw that in Florida to Georgia. And I saw people like skiing in the carts in like Georgia, like they didn't know what to do. And I was like, wow, like this is the South, and this is happening. Like what's gonna happen up north? And I'm also from Honduras, and Honduras is like a little part like of Central America, so I could see like Honduras is gonna be underwater. Like we are just a little like strip connecting north and south. And just thinking of that, it's what like inspired me. And then I attended to the tour that we had for Sunrise, and that seeing a lot of people like interested, and not just like all age groups, mostly young people, but a lot of age groups, like a lot of you all were there too, and your age group. And it just was very inspiring to see that it's happening, and there is a movement, and there is hope when we're taught by these systems of oppression that there's no hope, that our voices are not heard. And seeing that it is happening, we need to keep the momentum going. And that's what's happening with me in Sunrise, literally.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I thought the films, by the way, that you all showed us on that night at the 1,400 people jammed into the Strand Theater, and you showed us the videos of people who were directly suffering, as you say, asthma and other attacks. It was so moving, so powerful. I will emphasize that for myself, a couple of things. One, that I just learned that more people now die of air quality issues than from hunger or dirty water. So given my life's trajectory, that was very significant. But I right now I'm so obsessed with this, it's not too late, and the power of hope. And so I grew up in Texas, and one of the things that keeps me going is the realization that my state, the oil state, if it were a country, would now be the 6th largest producer of wind energy in the world. And this happened under the governorship of George Bush. So, and then I'm just reading, I don't think of Washington, D.C. as the green capital, but in fact, Washington has more green roofs than any other place. And all of the city of D.C. government buildings are now 100% renewable. So I try to always balance the oh my God feeling with surprises that at least now they are dramatic at some local and state levels. And so I just wanted to throw that piece in.
Yeah, I talk about this quite a bit, but when I was reading an article about endangered sea turtles back in the 90s, and then I just happened to see a Time magazine article, and it had the 50 most influential people, or I'm not sure exactly what the title was, but there was a quote in there. And the quote went, "The loss of biodiversity is the folly our descendants are least likely to forgive us." Anybody know whose quote that is?
Wilson.
Oh. Well done, yeah. So it was reading his book, Diversity of Life, especially the final chapters, that proved to be one of the catalysts of the epiphany that I referenced so much. He eloquently expressed the sentiment that by reducing the diversity of nature, we are downgrading the experience of future generations, and that we're but one among millions of interdependent species that inhabit this planet, all of which play an important role in achieving ecological balance. So, making that connection and then beginning to connect the dots is how I really began to approach sustainability. So I'm always moved by the voices that aren't being heard, and for the fact that even now today we're still fighting for the survival of species. For God's sakes, the Endangered Species Act is under attack again after all these years. So how I try to position that is, how do you think about the loss of biodiversity? to me, it's like taking colors out of the rainbow. As you go forward, do we want to have a world in sepia only? And that's how I think about losing biodiversity. So, and in that moment in the 90s when I started to read Diversity of Life and understanding that why in the world were we losing sea turtles? They've been around since the dinosaurs. I mean, you'd think we'd have enough water and sand, to go around, right? But it was really an indictment of one species. I mean, we were just careless, just frankly careless about coastal development, overfishing, boating, poaching, you name it. We did everything we could possibly do to reduce a species that's been so vibrant and important, and everybody remembers growing up and thinking about sea turtles were on the coast, and the fact that all of the species are now endangered. And I won't go into this, but if you go to the aquarium, you know that Myrtle's still alive. She's the oldest sea turtle in captivity, they think, today. So anyway, off the beaten track.
David, could I just add, I should have mentioned this, that of course the food agriculture contribution to climate change has moved me deeply, and I've learned recently that very credible analysis is that our meat-centered diet has done more to reduce biodiversity than any other single element, and that indeed this meat-centered diet that has so many ramifications is responsible. The overall food system created by this corporate-dominated system is responsible for about 1/3 of greenhouse gas emissions.
We have a question. You may have to, go ahead.
Hi, I have a 24-year-old daughter, and I hope it was okay, but I took pictures of 2 of you. So I want to go home and tell her about Sunrise Movement. And forgive me, maybe everyone else knows what you do, but I don't. So I would love to hear what you actually do. I just looked up on the map of the United States, and I don't know how you did it, but you're out everywhere, which is phenomenally awesome. Anyway, I'm going to stop there. I would just love to hear what you guys do. What is Sunrise Movement? What does it do?
Okay, so just to repeat the question is about how did Sunrise get in existence? What are you about? How did you get to be so successful so quickly? And on that, I'll turn it over.
So the Sunrise Movement is a decentralized youth-led movement that focuses on making the crisis of climate change, predominantly discussed in the political spectrum, and actually we want action to happen, and demanding action actually. And by decentralized, we mean, like you said, you saw the map full of different places where we are at. That is because we have hubs, we call them, and those are little chapters, and that's a way for us to be present all over the country, and it's for us to, it's like the national and then the hubs. So we have a national team who is in charge of our mission and all the actions that we want to take part of. And then we have the hubs, and that's how we can mobilize locally in our different states, because America's huge. So that's a part of Sunrise, and you wanna?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in thinking about, we must have something like easily over 100 hubs all over the country. I mean, over 200 hubs in the country. There's something like 20 in Massachusetts alone. There's so many. And you would think it gets kind of difficult to hold something like this together and make sure everyone's on the same page. So Sunrise is really, we as young people are training other young people to create a culture within which we can all operate and act towards what we have a handful of principles that we say, as long as you're acting within these guidelines, then you're acting in the name of Sunrise. And since you're decentralized, you can do whatever you want, as long as you're acting within our principles. And it's very empowering, right? We're creating a culture of empowerment, and we're trying to allow any other young person or any other not young person as well to carry a good, hopeful message forward. And that's how we sort of build power. And then we have meetings and hang out and have fun too. So it's the fun part of organizing.
We have another question in the back.
Can I add a little to that answer?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I'm Sam. I'm also with the Sunrise Movement. A piece of what our theory of change is that in order to accomplish the really large-scale legislative action that is needed to make a coordinated shift in our economy toward a renewable energy economy, in order to achieve that kind of legislation, we need to disrupt what is the current political paradigm. We've been living under this Reagan paradigm that says any major change needs to come from the market. The government really can't do anything. We realize that we need to provide a disruptive moral voice in order to break down that paradigm and make new possibilities. So as an organization within the broader climate movement, we see our role as creating that disruption so that the many, many organizations that I think many of you have been part of over many decades can finally go for the bigger, more ambitious goals that have been out of reach for the past 4 decades.
Good, well stated. Again, we'll answer any questions you want. I'm going to keep going on a list of a few things that we thought would be relevant. One of the criticisms of the United States is that while we're per capita the largest source of GHG emissions, we're not one of the nations that will suffer the most from climatic impact. This is the inequity of a climate crisis that has our handprints all over it. Do we bear a greater burden than other nations in the global effort to keep warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius? Throw it out there to everybody. What do you think? Yeah, I'll just add this. You know, we've really sort of abdicated our role of leadership here. The idea that we had the Paris Accord, we were part of that. We actually were building good environmental goodwill around the nation, around the world, the globe, was inspiring to me. I felt good that maybe we were actually going to begin to take that leadership role when it came to climate legislation, global accords, whatever. And so to take a giant leap backwards like we've done is frustrating, very frustrating. For any of us that travel overseas, we see it firsthand. When we were in Europe a year and a half ago, it was on people's minds. We can't walk away from this. I mean, you know, Edward O. Wilson, I mentioned him before, but he indicates that if everybody consumed, every other country consumed like we do here in the United States, we'd need 3 planets. So we do have that burden of responsibility. We do need to take on that mantle of leadership. And we've, since 2017, we've fully abandoned it. So we are seeing the scorn we're getting from other nations. I saw it personally, firsthand, when I was overseas. I did even during the second Bush administration. So people still look at us as somebody that can be an instigator to fix the problem, but boy, we need to step up quickly and take on this role of leadership. So do you want to?
I just wanted to add on the sad truth is exactly this, what David just said. The fact that we contribute 4 times per capita, you know, what the rest of the world does, that we can compare, you know, our population relative to our impact is 4-fold what we would if we were the average. That means that our stepping up and acting can have outsized impact as well. I mean, the fact that we're carrying so much more of a causal force means that we will, as we act, can have additional positive force.
So I also want to get to the heart of the matter a little bit. What we're trying to do here is, hopefully we laid out a little bit of what's going on. It's not that you guys don't know what's going on, but how do we all get involved and inspired, and how do we get involved from a local and from national level? So, you know, even community movements in our little town, what can we do? How do we make an impact from a local standpoint? How do we get more people engaged to make these efforts to combat climate change. So I'm just going to add one that I think of, and it's pretty simple, and maybe I oversimplify it, but we need to immediately stop consuming blindly. We need to begin to look at everything that we consume, and if you're consuming something that has zero tie to your local community, then you're consuming blindly. So if you can take the initiative to get involved at a local level, support your local markets, support your local vendors, get involved in your local mayoral elections, in your local city councilors, you would be surprised. I don't know that my mayor, Mike Cahill in Beverly, likes me very much, but he knows who I am. So I would encourage everybody to get involved. And also, it's not just youth movements, not just youth movements, but also there are so many different things going on at the community level that we can all pitch in and get involved in. Yeah.
Paradigm disruption is the happiest phrase I've heard yet today. Really like where you're going. I'm very interested in, we live under consumer capitalism, and most of our compatriots believe that this is the only best way to live. So you have a lot of mindset to change. I would like to know from Sunrise what you'd like to see here in 50 years when you guys are still around and we're not. What kind of world would you like to see specifically?
Oh boy.
You'd like to see us gone.
No. No.
Way we'll fix it.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you think?
I guess the easiest answer and very broad is a livable world.
Yeah.
And equity for everybody as well. And that's what someone talked about the Green New Deal, and that's what it is all about. Having a livable world and also addressing those issues of like economics as well as racial equality. And to me, that's what it looks like. It's no more oppression for anybody, and that's what climate change is. It's making us all act in ways that we wouldn't act if it wasn't there. And that's what capitalism is. It's making us all against each other, and that's the problem. That's the consumerism you're talking about. So to me, it's a livable world where there's no more systems of oppression or anything that's keeping us not hold each other's hand and seeing each other in eye level.
And I might also add that raw economics doesn't look toward the future, just for today.
The whole quarter.
Yeah. Go ahead, Nick.
I was just gonna.
There's a question in the back.
Sure. You want to do the question first? Okay. I was also just gonna briefly add, when we think of what kind of world we would want in 50 years, I think it's also a world that should have something that's possible right now, and it's so ingrained in us that this is another thing that Sunrise tries to break down. The notion that there are some who are like we know what's right and like we know all the right things, and there's some who don't. And while that's true, it's very easy, and it should be more encouraged that we speak with others, right? Even if we have other folks who don't agree with us, or other folks who may just not have the information that we all have access to. It's less of a, I know it sounds kind of idealistic and like hippy-dippy, but it's...
That's all right, you're young.
That's why we need more young people in this, right? We are here to change attitudes and to change minds, and you can only do that if you start talking to other people about things.
Okay, we had a question first back here, so go ahead.
Well, I was so happy a few minutes ago to hear you, Frankie, bring up the topic of meat consumption and its damaging impact on the climate and environment, because one of the passions of my life is educating about the benefits of plant diets and the harmfulness of animal agriculture, animal suffering, the environment, climate, and so forth. And I'm always frustrated and disturbed by the fact that that is not included in so many discussions of what we can do about climate change, how we can contribute in our daily lives with our daily food choices. And I'm wondering if you have any insights on why major environmental groups and groups that even focus on climate change are not including that as a fundamental of one of the main things that you just say every single time this topic comes up.
I think, did you hear the question?
Yeah, you might want to repeat the questions.
Why don't more environmentalists and people tackling climate change emphasize the impact of our corporate concentrated chemical agriculture and livestock focused? And I don't know, but I fear that they fear that people are going to be put off because they think it's somehow a sacrifice rather than this great joy that I've never felt sacrificing, of discovering all of the health and taste benefits of a plant-centered diet. But I think I wanted to, building, I think that it is a false fear. And I think that one of the things that we can do as environmental democracy, climate change activists, is to emphasize that to counter this idea that we don't have the money, it's going to be this great sacrifice, we can't afford this, and this is, how the Green New Deal was just dismissed by the Republicans as ridiculous. And it's so untrue that if corporations were just paying the percentage of our overall tax revenue that they did 30 years ago, we'd have a lot of money. If there weren't offshore tax havens, there's billions of dollars that would be available. And right now, do you know that our IRS staffing levels are what they were in 1953? So there's so much that we can do to reduce fear. This does tie in vaguely with the question, but to help reduce fear that we are making an investment. This is not just spending, this is an investing in life. So I think the more that we can help people reduce the fear of scarcity is good.
Yeah, go ahead, Alexa.
Something also to think about that is addressing poverty, because you cannot, at least I think where I come from in my community, we cannot change to a plant-based diet when we are full of food deserts and the only thing we have is a McDonald's or very cheap food where it's like mass-produced, like you said. We have I go to Stop and Shop, and before the strike, right? I go to Stop and Shop now, and I see that the pork is $2. And sometimes if I want to buy farm-raised or I want to buy like fresh products, I need to go to a Whole Foods. But do I have the money for that? I'm a broke college student. I don't. So we also have to address poverty in that situation as well.
Well spoken. Okay, I think you were next.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can take Mike.
Ooh, nice.
Hi. I have recently become aware of something besides the use of petroleum products and the increase in temperature globally. That is possibly, I think, at least as much of a cause, and it's the denigration of the world's topsoils. Mm-hmm. And it is really known that healthy soils will hold lots of carbon, and also many times their weight in water. So I asked an expert last Tuesday night whether she would agree that if the Great Plains had been farmed for these years in a way that would keep the health of the soil, they might not have had that flood. And she agreed. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I can also attest to the fact that there's some great books. Wes Jackson, if you've ever read Wes Jackson, he'll tell you that we never should have torn down the prairies.
Oh,
The prairie grasses were so important for water retention and whatever, and the whole idea of let's farm and grow and agriculture did produce a part of the reason why the Dust Bowl happened. And we lost so much topsoil, so a lot of these deep-rooted plants or whatever have such an important role to play. And yes, that had a lot to do with the disasters and the floods. And the bomb cyclone that went through the Midwest devoured some of our breadbasket. So there's no question that we've lost topsoil, and we've got to begin to continue. It's global, and we're desertifying so many places of the planet as a result of obviously poor agricultural practices, cattle grazing. There's a lot of reasons, but we got a lot of questions. I think you were next here. I'm sorry, I'll come right back to you.
I wanted to bring up something that's really on top. And that is talking about reproduction.
Yeah.
And we have to talk about it. We've even taken stuff out of the UN that helps women. I mean, we are doing a whole lot of things that are absolutely negative.
Yeah, I know. So the question is, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but the question's about population. It's a hard topic. I've had to discuss it before in these environments because nobody wants to be told about their reproductive rights but you know the reality is that this was an issue. We were talking about the book The Population Bomb that came out in the 70s. This was Paul Ehrlich's whole thing, right? So the reality is that there are areas of the globe where population is still rapidly increasing. There's no way that we can possibly prepare the environment for this next flow. If we get to 9 billion people, really, are we going to be able to have enough arable land? And if we have enough arable land, does that mean we have to get rid of virtually all other species so we do nothing but support all these 9 billion people? I mean, there's no question that is a factor going forward.
It's not just there,
It's here. It's here too, sure.
At this very moment, the rights of women are being attacked. So
Yeah, and now the other issue is, right.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, so the question is also then about women's reproductive rights being under attack here in the United States, and that plays into it as well. The fact that, and unfortunately, as you well know, a lot of the people that are hurt the most are the poorest as a result of this, and so it's the whole idea of population moving forward and women's rights, they're all tied in, and we've obviously, in order to attain any kind of sustainable population level, this all has to come into the discussion. But there are nations still where women are bearing 6 children per person, so or per mother. So no question that's an issue. I know I didn't address it. Do you want to address it at all? Anybody?
I think there's a direct response.
You want to?
I think it's really important to distinguish this issue into to identify 2 different pieces here. Being able to feed everybody, being able to sustain a continually growing population is obviously definitely something we have to figure out. We have to be also really careful that we don't get distracted from the big issue, which is that no matter how many people are on the planet, it's actually how we're feeding everybody and how the economy is providing energy for everybody that's going to make the difference. And so often these discussions end up focusing on countries where there are high fertility rates, but those tend to be the same countries that consume the least amount and emit the least amount of greenhouse gases per person. I think that, Naomi Klein writes about this very clearly in This Changes Everything, her 2014 book. It's really, really important for us to not have our attention pulled to this very sort of deep fear-inducing question of should we stop having kids, because that's how so many people frame it. We really need to keep our eye on how are we producing energy and how are we producing food for everybody, and not get distracted by the question of how many kids per person should we be.
Right. Well, I'll tell you what, before we even move on forward, I have somebody up here who's been talking about that for 50 years, so I'm not even going to speak on that.
Well, I just want to say that one of the most inspiring things for me is as I've gone into India, Africa, where there are high fertility rates, where there is a correlation of where women are gaining power over their fertility. These are the very communities that are moving toward agroecology practices. And I just have one of the most inspiring stories I ever visited. You could see it online if you want to read it and be inspired. It's called, the blog I wrote is called The Best Gift Ever. I just saw the solution to world hunger. And it's about women in India who are achieving agricultural transformation, and they are choosing smaller families. It's all together because they have voice and power.
Okay, and you got a question?
I just wanted to riff off and expand on my kind of disappointment also, or we're shocked that the environmental groups don't.
Yeah, Nick, can you give her the letter?
Well, that the environmental groups don't address what I know the UN's Agriculture's Long Shadow concluded was that industrial animal agriculture contributes more than all the other forms of transportation and fossil fuel. And my turning point was reading Diet for a Small Planet and learning that most of the water in this country goes for animal industrial agriculture. And then, you know, we've all seen those horrible scenes with all the lagoon waste, it's kind of the combination of all evils, really. You know, we're polluting the water, the lungs of the planet, the Amazon rainforest, that's for hamburgers. So soil, water, air, and then my tax dollars, why are the hamburgers so cheap? You know, I think we can politicize the fact that we're subsidizing meat and dairy, and maybe talk about how about divesting in some of the main industrial agricultural companies. And you know, I do talk to people at my church, my community, my groups, and this is just not well known, and people are amazed at the biggest impact they can have is, you know, with their fork 3 times a day, and I don't know why it's just not brought to the forefront more, because it's such a...
Well, again, I'll turn it over to Frankie. I'm just going to say this. If everybody at 18 years old could get E. coli from roast beef like I did, we would no longer have this problem. We would actually be plant-based consumers. So I gave up meat at that point and haven't had one since. Sorry, just a little interview.
Well, I'm just going to bring us back to the democracy premise that we know the role of money in our political system and how it breaks democracy, and that I believe it's true that the agribusiness lobby is bigger than the oil and gas. And so we have to, as we are moving forward to arm in arm on climate crisis, we simultaneously have to be making democracy in America, getting money out and our voices in.
I know we had another question. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. I'll get to you next.
2 quick points. One is to add to that discussion what you were saying about the population. You'll remember this more precisely than me, but there was an article way back by Barry Commoner about the most effective way of reducing population, raising the standards of living.
Yeah, education. Yeah, and education.
Yeah.
For women, yeah.
But it relates to what we talk about poverty. Just another quick thing. I just read an article recently in The Intercept about the plastics industry, of waste only. Some of you may have read this. It was shocking to me that most of the plastic that's recycled is not then used for anything, because there's all sorts of poisons that, you know, nobody wants to use it. You can't really recycle it. It just points to me to the fact of how that this is a systemic thing. That yes, as individuals, we don't have to, I don't eat meat, we don't have, you know, we try to recycle, but that's not going to solve it. We have to change the systems, one of them being a predatory vulture capitalist system, but to think in those kind of terms, or it's not going to happen. That's a great article if you want.
Yeah, there's a lot to that. I'll only address the plastics part of it. Part in my book that I won't read, but there's a woman that founded a sea turtle hospital in her daughter's honor. And when I talked to her recently in my book about what would her one green deed be, she said to get rid of plastic. She said, I'm seeing it firsthand. Every sea turtle that comes in is consuming plastic. They're caught in their digestive tract. We're seeing whales, beach, plastic is becoming the most common surface item in the ocean. So plastics has invaded our system. And for example, we used to have glass bottles, and glass bottles with aluminum caps on them. Remember those?
Oh, yeah.
And glass can be reused into glass. Plastic does not have that ability, and plastic then degrades to a point where you can maybe crush it and put it into a different component piece, but ultimately it ends back in that particle form and leaches somewhere. And of all the plastics in use today, it's less than 10% that gets recycled anyway. So much of it's embedded. Most of it was never even intended to be recycled or reused. Plastics, in a 100-year period, has basically become the single most incredible waste pollutant that we've created on this planet. And this is the other thing I want to say about recycling real quick, and I hope I'm not too far off your point, but we tend to get guilty about recycling. Oh crap, is that 6 or 5? Did I recycle that? Does that go in this bin? And I'm telling you, that is misguided thought and guilt, because we're not the producers of that. We need to put the pressure back on those producers. If they're not taking care of the product they're making, they are environmental criminals. And I'm sorry I'm putting it that way, but that is the truth. So we have way too much of these manufacturers getting away with their products. And do they ever factor in end of life for their products? No. So, okay. Yeah. I'm sorry.
To that
Go ahead,
point,
Stan.
Could you talk a little bit about carbon pricing?
Yeah, I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So we had another question. Jason in the back.
I'm Jason Pramus with Dig Boston, newspaper, independent newspaper in Boston, and the Boston Institute for Nonprofit Journalism. I just wanted to thank the panel. We're co-sponsoring this. This is great. And to say hi. And to say that
Thank you.
We're here as journalists to amplify the voices of the social movements here and all over the world that are trying to, fight the fight to mitigate and ideally stop global warming, human-induced global warming. So that's it.
Thank you. Okay, we had a question. Was that?
Laura Spark.
Oh yeah, hi Laura. How are you?
I just wanted to encourage, because people are talking a lot about national stuff, and there's stuff going on at state level.
So Laura's with Clean Water Action, and yeah.
There's stuff going on at the state level. There's some good movement forward, but we need more movement forward. And this is one of those things where literally one call. Tomorrow morning a call, equitable carbon pricing, which is there's a House bill that might or might not go forward. The Benson bill, the H2.
State House.
There's an equitable carbon pricing bill that we're trying to get
Laura,
moving forward.
come on up here. Talk a little bit about. I think it's important enough to talk about this carbon fee and dividend bill. We need to know about it. This is something that a lot of people will tell you that the first big step we've got to take in ways to level out the playing field with energy is to get a carbon fee and dividend legislative bill passed. So
I'm not that. Am I talking right into it in the right way? Yes. So I'm Laura Spark from Clean Water Action. We had talked about this and
yeah.
The light wasn't mine. So there's a couple of bills right now that we're trying to push forward, and we would be excited to have everybody's support. One, I guess, let me do carbon pricing last because it's the most complex. One is 100% renewable, a bill to commit the state to 100% renewable on certain time frames. Two is environmental justice. We have environmental justice policy, but it's an executive order. We're trying to get it in law. And third is carbon pricing. Carbon pricing, probably people in this room know, puts a price on coal, oil, gas. It charges a fee on all of those imports as they come into the state. We send $20 billion out of the state each year to buy those things. And a carbon fee would put a small and slowly escalating price on carbon. What the bill that is in the House would do and what makes it equitable is that all of the revenues from that fee, which are substantial, 70% would be returned to households with rebates, which would be twice annually, and they would be calculated so that low and moderate income people got larger rebates, so that they would cover the cost of the increasing cost of energy, which is important. Also, 30% of the revenues would be invested in renewable energy, clean transportation, energy efficiency. And that is a lot of money. It starts at $400 million in year one, it goes up to $600 million. And the way the bill has been written is 40% of the revenues have to be for low-income people. So the investment goes to low-income people. So that way low-income people are protected from the increasing cost of energy, and there's also money to help people make the transition. So it's sort of a complicated bill. There are other pieces. There's fuel assistance in there. Yeah.
What did you say your name was?
My name, I'm sorry.
Organization?
Yeah, I'm Laura Spark. My organization is Clean Water Action.
What is it, Clean Water Action?
Clean Water Action. We're part of a lot of environmental groups that are working together on this. So 350 is working on this, and Environmental Mass, and I think you guys are pulled in on some of it. Sunrise Boston, Our Climate. a lot of the environmental groups, these are the three environmental policies we're trying to get passed at the state level this year. There's a lot of other good things going forward, not just those. But those are three that we're trying to push further. The other thing, I think, is the Weymouth thing, which probably someone else. They're trying to get people in Weymouth are trying to stop a gas compressor station, trying to get people like us who don't live in Weymouth to call the governor and say stop. So that's the other big thing that's happening. So thank you for letting me talk a little bit.
You've had a question. You've been very patient. I'm sorry.
It's less a question and more of resources. We live in Cambridge. We're here in Cambridge. Cambridge is the academic capital of the world, right? So everybody who talks about climate change comes through Cambridge. If they're not talking at Harvard, they're talking at MIT. If they're not talking at MIT, they're talking at BU. If they're not talking at BU, they're talking at Tufts. If they're not talking at Tufts, they're talking at Northeastern or BC or someplace else.
Or here.
For 10 years, I've been publishing a free weekly listing of energy and other events that covers all of that stuff. So it's available. It's called Hub Events, all one word, hubevents.blogspot.com. It's free. Look at it. It has information about the demonstrations that are coming up on the 1st, on the 2nd, and on the 5th at the State House about Weymouth. It has sunrise events. It has Extinction Rebellion, all of that kind of stuff.
And it's wonderful.
Say the name again.
Say it.
Hub Events, all one word, hubevents.blogspot.com. I've been doing it for 10 years for free. The only environmental group that I know of that really uses it is EDF. If there were a group of people who decided to go to the climate change, the energy lectures, because not one person can cover everything that's happening, and shared notes, that group would be world-class experts at the end of the year. They would also help break down the academic silos, because the atmospheric chemists are not talking to the mechanical engineers, are not talking to the chemical engineers, are not, certainly not talking to the nuclear engineers, because they don't talk to anybody. So that's one thing. Also in Cambridge, also in the Boston area, is a great organization called Biodiversity for a Livable Climate, right?
Right.
Yes.
Biodiversity for a Livable Climate has been doing world-class conferences, thank you for the word. Conferences for about the last 5 years. All of the videos of their conferences are online at their website. They are people who are talking about geotherapy, not geoengineering, all right? But geotherapy. How do you use existing ecological systems to repair the damage that Homo sapiens sapien, the sap, has already done? These are the kinds of resources that are available to us. And we have to start thinking about these resources as well as voting, as well as lobbying, as well as demonstrating. We've been stuck in a kind of mode of the 60s, and we have to think beyond that. Last thing, carbon pricing is great, but if you talk about carbon pricing without talking about the subsidies for fossil fuels that are there. As you may know, within the last couple of months, those communists at the International Monetary Fund did a report to talk about the direct and the indirect subsidies on a global and national basis for fossil foolishness. The United States spends, according to them, $649 billion per year on fossil fuel subsidies, direct and indirect.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to cut you off a little bit. We've got 5 more minutes, and so.
I'm just going to say that there are many other ways of dealing with this stuff. Just look around and pick them, because we have so many opportunities because we live here in this area. I got to just. I'm sorry. If you want, we can certainly address questions afterwards, but we got to wrap it up. I'm just going to leave it one last question for all of us. So what is your message of hope?
we want to leave here with some messages of hope so all of us can take that away, and all of us have different experiences and perspectives. So
I think at least my part of what Sunrise believes, a message of hope, a pretty good one, we think, is that, you know, it sort of ties in with the, you know, everything we had just said in the past 10 minutes. There's a lot out there. We can, if you're interested in policy things, you can do policy things. If you're interested in mailing lists, you can be a mailing list organizer. But the point is, the easiest thing that we can do is just get together, find some friends, and doing the work is much easier than you think. But all it takes, it's just, we have this in our brains that it's very hard, but it's actually very easy. We just have to get together because our voices are powerful together.
Well said.
Thank you. Our message of hope is for you to get involved with us too. So we have a Venmo page if you want to sponsor us at Sunrise Boston. You can donate at sunrisemovement.org. What's that? / donate. If you're over 35, join us.
If you're over 35, you could join our sibling movement, Extinction Rebellion. Yay! But if you're under 35, or if you know anyone under 35, please encourage them to join Sunrise. We can share a link with you after because it's hard to remember. But please come talk to us if you are interested.
That's my message of hope.
Well, my message of hope is very linked to you because my theme song, as I said earlier, is it's not possible to know what's possible, and therefore we are free to go for the world we want. And I would not have predicted 2.5 years ago that Sunrise would burst into my life. So it's not possible to know, and you've done it. You're doing it, and you are my hope.
I was just going to mention, Frankie wrote a 3 million copy book. This was my 1971 book. It was an A to Z environment dictionary when I was 8 years old. I was a very troubled young man about the environment. But I'm going to leave it this way. Hope is what drives us all to look beyond, and faith and dreams are the brightest stars in the constellation of hope. Preserving the environment, this living and breathing apparatus that sustains life, for my children and for all future generations is my dream. Knowing that there are passionate authors, educators, environmentalists, and people everywhere who share this dream is the basis of my faith. Faith and dreams alone won't make fresh water free or clean air communal. They won't keep ice on the ground or cool our atmospheric coils. They won't repair our reefs or restock our streams. They aren't the science-based solutions to the environmental challenges of our times. But faith and dreams are often what unite us, and it will require a cooperative effort to solve these challenges. Somewhere deep within the spirit of collaboration is that spark that fuels my hope.
Wow. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
So we do have, we can sign books. I know there are books on the shelves of ours if any of you are interested, and I know they've got to put the bookstore back together as quick as possible. So.
Well, let me say, first of all, I by no means, I know some people are starting to get late, so some people have to go, but we don't want to cut off discussion at all. David and Frankie and Lex and Nick are going to be here to talk about these things as long as you guys would like, and the discussion can absolutely continue. Remember that until 5 o'clock, everything that you spend in the bookstore, 20% of it is going to Sunrise.
Oh, we have to have time to shop.
Thank you guys for coming in and talking about this very, very important topic. Thank all of you for taking time on it.
Thank you, Porter Square.
Thank you, Dave.
I hope we'll see you again. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.